Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm Debbie Jackson, the Assistant Director for State Work Study, and I will be presenting today along with Calvin Rollmaker, our Program Manager. Today's agenda, we will briefly discuss any operational updates, portal overview, and expenditures. For some of you, these processes and information is not new to you, but for those that are just new to State Work Study, hopefully you'll find this helpful. Going on to operational updates, there has been new legislative changes resulting in a new initiative, Substitute House Bill 2025. You may recall we emailed communication regarding this new initiative, which relates to modifying the placement and salary matching requirements for the State Work Study program. Also, at this time, a State Work Study appropriation remains the same and has not changed. Continuing on with this new initiative of modifying placement and salary matching requirements for State Work Study, employer eligibility. Employers who are eligible for participation are public and nonprofit employers that seek to increase post-secondary enrollment for high school students. Employer match rates are yet to be determined, and I will briefly go over some factors that may affect how we determine what those match rates will be on the next slide. Job development. This can be very broad. This is where the employer may consult with institutions and with us in developing job descriptions that will help high school students enroll and pursue a post-secondary credential after graduating high school. For this new initiative, we are introducing this as a pilot program. We recently emailed information and a short survey to generate interest to all our public and nonprofit employers that are in the portal. The why behind this initiative may be due to Washington's declining post-secondary enrollment rate, especially for students of color. Also, research has shown near-peer mentors positively affect post-secondary enrollment. This next slide is just a short overview of current reimbursement rates. Most of you know this information, but for those who are new or need a refresher, here they are. So for-profit, 40% is the reimbursed for-profit organizations, 40% is the maximum reimbursement rate, and 60% is the match rate. Public, private, and governmental institutions and agencies, 60% is the reimbursement rate, and 40% is the employer match rate. For nonprofit community service providers, school districts, and STEM organizations, 70% is the maximum reimbursement rate, and 30% is the employer match rate. Sorry, oh my goodness, I think are you guys still seeing me? Something just happened. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Oh my goodness. The next slide is for going over portal, some of the portal overview regarding the year-end report and 3% administrative allowance. We are still in this process. We are still submitting those reports. And this is just going to go over briefly over the 3% administrative allowance. And this pertains to public institutions only. So communication was emailed around mid-June about the year-end report with the due date of July 15th. If you haven't submitted, please do so as soon as possible. The report is done in the portal and it's automatically populated. All you have to do is plug in your numbers and the portal does all the calculations for you. And then you just hit that submit button. If you have not submitted a report, please let me know, or if you need any additional assistance or need some more time to get that submitted. I'm always happy to help, so just let me know if you need assistance. Going on with the portal overview, this is for new institutional staff for portal access. Your direct supervisor can set up new staff for these state work study activities, such as employer applications. Public and private institutions can see what employers have applied. Job descriptions, this is for private institutions. This is where employers can submit the job institutions and for private institutions only, job descriptions. Timesheets, also for private institutions. Reconciling timesheets, this is also for private institutions. Cash requests, public. Fund balance, public and private. And as we mentioned before, the year-end report pertains only to public institutions. The next section of this, for the next slide, Calvin will go over any employer contracts and more the portal overview and also expenditures. So I will turn it over to you, Calvin.
Thanks, Debbie. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, like Debbie said, I wanted to use some time because there's been, a lot of turnover in our program at various colleges and I wanted to use some time just to go over some kind of basics about uh like the sort of workflow of things in the portal as it pertains especially to like employer contracts and job descriptions, as well as like timesheet processes for private colleges in particular. So if you aren't new, I apologize if this is a bit rudimentary, but I did just want to make sure this kind of information was out there. Also, I'm in a webinar last year, I believe I did some kind of walking through of the actual pages on the portal. I'm not going to be doing that today, just in the kind of interest of time and kind of keeping things simple. I really just want to cover the what happens rather than like showing how it happens. That being said, if anyone attending this webinar or at all working with the state's work study program, if there are ever specific questions about how do I find X or Y thing in the portal, how do I actually perform X or Y action in the portal, I'm always available for that sort of thing. So anyway, just getting into employer contracts. So any employer that participates in state work study program, the first thing they need to have is an approved employer contract. We now keep all employer contracts in the portal. That goes for both employers with public and private colleges. So first things first, the employer, if they're interested in state work study, they should create an employer contract in the portal. For public colleges, you may approve, reject, you'll approve or reject employer contracts for your own school in the portal. Let me walk back just a second. When an employer submits a contract, they can select which schools they're interested in working with. This is primarily in the interest of notifying the schools that a contract is either available for review or it's been approved by WASAC, so that we're not notifying every single school in the state. If an employer in Tacoma wants to be approved, they're only going to work and they're only going to work with schools in Tacoma, we don't necessarily need a school in Spokane being notified of that. That being said, when an employer selects a public institution on their contract, the public institution has the ability to approve or reject those contracts for their school. And you can also, there's a button on that essentially allows you to notify us that, hey, actually, we don't want to review this. Can you review it for us? So employers, schools, public schools can do that for their own schools. Any contract that is approved by WASAC, regardless of what schools were selected by the employer, can actually be used at any school in the state. So if an employer has an approved contract, that contract is good. It doesn't matter whether your school is listed on the contract or not, it can be used. On the employer's search screen in the portal, there's a sort of checkbox when you're in the portal looking through employer contracts. Say an employer has contacted you, they say, hi, we're interested in working with your school. If you want to look them up to make sure that they have an approved employer contract, I recommend selecting that view all employer contracts checkbox to make sure that you're viewing all employers in the state, all approved employers, that is, so you can make sure you're not, that you have access to the information that you need for that. So once an employer is approved in the portal, right, once an employer's contract is approved in the portal, I should say, the next thing that needs to happen is they need to have a job description approved. This is true at any school in the state. Before a student is hired for a job and hours are reimbursed, the job description itself has to be approved. And it diverges for public and private colleges in the sense that for public colleges, those job descriptions need to be approved only by the college. WASAC is not required to take a look at those or approve those. They're valid if they're approved by the college. For that reason, we don't keep public college contracts in the portal. Most of the schools that are here, you already have some process for doing that internally. I know many of you don't already work with off-campus employers, but that is something you can do. And although we've now transitioned in the portal to using an electronic job description, there is still we still have our old paper job description our old paper job description form for if a public college, if you want to just use that form as your way of keeping track of job description, that is something you can do. But for private colleges, the employer will need to, actually they can do this before their contract is approved, but after they've submitted a contract, the employer, if they want to hire from a private college, they'll have to go in and create a job description on the portal as well. That includes basic information like what's the wage, what are the duties of the job, the job description. That has to be approved in the portal both by the school and by us. So be sure that if you're a private college, be sure that you're checking when you get those automatic emails from employers notifying you of a new job description. Be sure that you're checking on those. And also, I know, for example, that right now, we've got some that have come in for the new year for employers that are awaiting approval by the institution. So if you're here right now, you represent a private college, I'd recommend going in and checking on that to make sure that that you're looking at those pending job descriptions from employers. One last feature, and this is relatively newer since the portal update, is that if you get a job description from an employer and it's mostly good, but you need like a little bit of a change, you don't necessarily want to reject it, there is a button there to request changes, and you can select that button, type in what changes that you want, and the employer will be notified that, hey, so and so has requested that you edit the job description in this way, um, before approving, and they can do that, and then if everything is satisfactory, then the job description can be approved. Um, so timesheets, when an employer is ready to submit, when you receive timesheets from employers, if you're a private college, those are uploaded to the portal. I know most of you are quite familiar with this because this is the most common thing that's done in the portal if you're a private college. Those are uploaded in the portal. When they're uploaded, I take a look. I'm checking for those all the time. I take a look. I make sure everything looks good. If they're good, they're approved, and they move on. If they're not good, I will the portal will show me if there are errors with the timesheet. So I'm looking for those. For the most part, the timesheets are just automatically approved because everything's okay and they go through. The portal will show me where there's errors that I need to look into. Usually what will happen is I will reject the timesheet, which the intention of that is not to permanently say, no, we'll not pay this timesheet, but to request a change, or request clarification about a certain thing. It's for example, a common one is maybe you've already submitted timesheet for, Minnie Mouse for, the dates of September 1st through 15th. You submit a new timesheet for Minnie Mouse for the same job for September 13th through 15th. That's a thing that I'll flag and want follow up on to make sure, are these dates correct? Are they wrong? Do I need to add hours to the previously existing timesheet? And by the way, I do want to make just one aside about that, since this has come up. I don't want anyone to feel singled out by this. It's actually come up for a couple schools somewhat recently. If you've submitted a timesheet already, whether it's been paid, reconciled, whatever, if there needs to be a change made to that timesheet, like hours need to be added or taken away, email us and we can change the timesheets, and then deal with, if hours need to be taken away, then we'll go through a repayment process. If hours need to be added, then the difference there is reimbursed just like any normal timesheet. So anyway, if you need to add hours to a timesheet, I always prefer if you just email rather than submit it to a new timesheet, kind of making up the difference. Anyway, that's just an aside, but I wanted to, put that out there. Anyway, timesheets are approved. They're processed for payment each Friday. Once they're processed for payment, they're available to be reconciled. This reconciliation process is essentially like this it's a chance to catch any errors that might have been made, and for you to review the what we have in the portal for your timesheets versus what you think we should have. If there's any errors with, discrepancies between those two things, you can follow up with us and we can get that corrected. If there aren't any errors, you can mark those timesheets as reconciled. Please be sure that you're completing this reconciliation at least once a month. Another common error that the portal will show me for timesheets is if a school has timesheets that have gone unreconciled for longer than 30 days, I'll get an error warning me about that. And usually what will just happen is I'll just follow up in the school and say, hey, can you do this? But the reason for that is we don't want to build too much of a backlog of timesheets that need to be reconciled. And then, when it comes time, it can get to be overwhelming. Also, I do want to put a plug in, if submitting timesheets as soon as possible is always helpful for us, rather than waiting till the end of a year to submit them. It helps us a lot. If there's going to be any errors, it's a lot easier to catch those as they go rather than all at once at the end of the year. And the last thing about this, there is a search tool in the portal for timesheets. So if you ever have one that's like you need to check, oh, has this been reconciled yet? Is it still awaiting review? Has it been rejected? You can use that search tool in the portal to look up the status of those timesheets. Um, and that's essentially it for my portal processes. Before moving on, I didn't make a slide for this because it's a relatively simple thing, and I think it's well known how to do. But for public colleges, the equivalent of you submitting timesheets is instead submitting a cash request. Please be sure to submit cash requests once a month, at least once a month. Especially one thing we're going to go into actually in just a second is that our expenditures after taking a kind of a hit to participation in state work study during COVID, our expenditures are kind of getting back up, and we want to make sure that the cash requests that we get and the timesheets that we get asked for reimbursement, that there's going to be that we're going to be able to, if a supplemental request is required for your work study yearly allocation, that we can process those in time, and that we have the ability to approve those. And the more frequently we get timesheets, the more frequently we get cash requests, the easier it is for us to stay on top of that, and make sure that essentially you get what you need in terms of those cash requests or those supplemental fund requests, things like that. So anyway, just a plug there for a monthly cash request. So on this next slide, kind of switching gears a little bit, we're looking at expenditures just a bit. So this is our expenditure profile for 2022-23. This is data from our unit record report from that year. 22-23 was a year of pretty low expenditures for state work study, and we're going to look more at that on the next slide. But in gross earnings, that was still $8.9 million, and about $3 million of that was employer match, so making that about 5.9 in expenditures, which I think a bit less than that. But 2,650 students participated in work study and earned an average of $3,367 for total earnings for the year. 34% of this is earned by students attending public 4 years. 35% of this is earned by students attending private 4 years, and 30.6% of this is earned by students attending public 2 years. 91% of gross state work study earnings were earned by students working on campus, and 9% were earned by students working off campus, and 91% were earned by undergraduate students and 9% by graduates. And for this last slide, I just wanted to show kind of how expenditures have looked over the past 10 years. Okay, the reason I wanted to include this, I mentioned that we took a bit of a hit in terms of state work study participation due to COVID. I think that's probably obvious to anyone who's worked in this, but I wanted to show this chart because we have had a pretty significant bounce back this year. Like it kind of looks like a bit of a return to form. Obviously, I guess like 1 year is not really a trend, but it is something. So, you can see here over the past 10 years, we've had a pretty, like, prior to COVID, we had a pretty steady expenditures, in the $7.5 million range. COVID hits, we take a big hit. I did want to point out the year 2021-22, you might notice that that's kind of high. That's also we had high utilization that year for, excuse me, that year for, you'll recall we had during COVID, and if you're not new, or if you are new, then this may be new, but during COVID we had a grant option for state work study, meaning we could convert state work study funds into grants for students, essentially saying you can get your state work study award as a grant. You don't have to work these hours to get this reimbursement. So we had high utilization of that option during the year 2021-22. That ended for the year 2022-23, which you can see is our like lowest year in this entire range by far. But I think we've seen, and I was seeing this throughout the year as well. You know, I would check periodically how's our expenditures looking, how does it compare to, you know, 4 years ago at this time, 3 years ago, 2 years ago at the same time, and things have looked good pretty much throughout the entire year. And you know, you can see we're not quite, like, there is still a bit of a difference yet between what we spent so far this year and what we spent, say, in, you know, 2017. But we're really getting a lot closer to where we used to be, and I'm hoping that this will look like, you know, going forward, that we're going to get more of this kind of relatively straight line instead of these jagged ups and downs. So, and by the way, I mean that's due in large part to you know, you guys, the people attending this webinar. I mean, yeah. So we really appreciate that. And you know, we'll see how these expenditures play out as we get into this pilot program for these new employers. You know, what level of participation we're going to have for that, and things like that. But anyway, the point of this slide is I did want to show that things were looking up for the program in terms of our in terms of utilization and students, you know, using their work study dollars, and which we want to see. So should I stop right now? I haven't been able to see questions. Colleen, have there been questions that we should address yet, or should we wait till the end?
There's one question that Debbie, a couple here. Debbie, do you want to say those out loud, or?
Sure. So this question is for approved employer applications from WASAC. Are all employers are approved, even if employers has no relation to the career path within the program of which the student is enrolled?
No, not necessarily. No, not necessarily. However, I will, you know, as an aside for that, just because a employer is approved by WASAC does not mean that you as a college have to work with that employer. So if there is, you know, if an employer is approved, however, you don't feel like they're a good fit for your college, or that the job description that they're submitting is a good fit for your students, you still have the right to, you know, essentially like right of refusal to say, you know, in spite of what WASAC has said, they've approved the contract, we still don't feel like this is like a good fit for our student. You know, say you're, you know, like a law school, and you know, you get a job description for you know, I don't know, an office assistant or something, like, you know, whatever the case may be, yeah. So short answer, no, not all employers are approved based on their, you know, what they do, and whether we feel it's fits with a student's career goals. But even beyond that, you're still as a sort of student employment administrator at a school, you still have discretion about, regardless of the status of the contract, about employers.
And
Was that
Cal,
it? I thought.
I'm
I'm
sorry,
sorry.
just to add to that, even though we may approve them in the portal, that employer, it may be different for another with that school.
Mhm.
So it may not fit with yours, but it may fit with another institution.
Right. Right.
There is another question. This question was, is there any movement to do private college timesheet collection in the portal or an electronic version? Collecting PDFs from employers is one of our greatest challenges and is one of the limiting factors to expanding. And what I said at this time, that is not something that we can do now in the portal, but it is something that we could discuss with our IT team to see if something like that is feasible, if the employer and students are able to electronically submit their timesheets to the
Mhm.
institute. So that's something that we can look into and get back to you with that. Let's see.
Does look like one more just came in.
I'm not sure if this is really a question, but here it is. Is there any thought to the fact that employers and students, that employers and not students are the greatest beneficiary with the work study? It feels like the funds could be better used in a grant program. I'm not sure we can answer that. That's something that we would probably need to discuss. I'm not sure if really what you mean, that employers and not students are the greatest beneficiary. Um, so we can get back to that.
Mhm. Yeah.
And, and the next question is, I would like to know from other institutions what business practices they have for public school, as no guidance is available for processes and practices by state work study. And I believe this question is referring to timesheets being submitted, of that nature. And right now, at one point, there was Wasasia, where schools got together and discussed their practices and processes. And that is something that we may touch on to bring schools together and discuss what is working best for them, what current processes they use, so that everyone can share what's working, what isn't working, and what do you do in certain situations. So that is something that we're thinking, with your input, of course, if that's something that we can put together and have the schools come together and discuss these things.
Mhm. Is that it for questions for now, Debbie?
I believe that's it for questions.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So just a couple last things. Thank you for those questions, by the way, everyone. A couple less things to go over. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was up to date on minimum wages. So as of January 1st, 2024, Washington State minimum wage is $16.28 per hour. There are new local minimum wages that are higher than the state minimum wage. Like some of the, by new I mean like, this year that these municipalities have created these minimum wages. So these are the following that have a higher minimum wage: the city of Seattle, Tukwila, SeaTac, Renton, and Bellingham. If you are an employer in or near those areas, um please, be familiar with those as you're getting job descriptions from employers. Um, and especially in some of these, there are different minimums based on the employer size. So, be sure you can check at the Washington State Labor and Industries Department of Labor and Industries website. That will have all these wages, including links to the city government websites, which will kind of enumerate the specifics of things like employer size. And yeah, it looks like I can see uh uh little pings for questions that have come in. Debbie, are there more here?
One moment. Yes, will there be an updated manual for employers and administrators? And if so, will it be available in the portal? The State Work Study Program Manual should be published shortly. And we will let you know when that is available on the website.
Yes, and as far as an employer manual, uh, we do that we've been working on and we'll need to revisit working on updating the employer manual with things like the portal processes. I hadn't considered making that available on the portal. It currently the existing one is available on the WASAC website. However, that is an idea worth considering since the portal is kind of where employers go. And so anyway, I'll just move on to our last slide here, which is just a thank you to everyone for being here and for the work you do. Yeah, like I said, like I'm very appreciative of what's happened, especially in this past year as participation has really gone back up. We know that represents a lot of work on your part. So yeah, thank you.
And actually, before we close, I just wanted to touch back on the new initiative, Substitute House Bill 2025. I'm not sure if I really communicated that we're starting it out as a pilot program, and possibility of reimbursing pilots up to 100%. And the rate will depend on how many pilots are selected. And also, there hasn't been new funding for this program. So that also may affect how we determine increasing the reimbursement rate. I just wanted to let you all know that. So if you know of any employers, any off-campus employers, please let us know. And that's all I have to say. And I just want to, thank you again for being here today and your questions. Please email me or Calvin if anything that we can help with or answer any more questions. We are very happy to do that. I see there's still some questions coming in here.
Yes. So I see it looks like the newest questions are well, again, I don't know if this is one of the ones we already answered, but about the finding the employer manual, we can look at or the program manual rather. We can maybe look at making that more accessible. I think that's maybe more of a a sort of webmaster situation, but we can take a look at that, and we'll notify everyone of how to find the new one when it's out, and how to find it. For there's a question, is there a timeline for final allocation numbers? Yes, essentially when everything with the capital E is closed out for 23-24, when schools have all submitted their final year-end reports, when we know that we've gotten the last of the last timesheets from private colleges, and we can wrap everything up there, that's when the new numbers will become available. The reason for that is we when we create the allocation numbers, we look at expenditures over the past 10 years, and so we want to make sure we have the most up-to-date information for that when we're doing that. Another, when will the pilots be notified? We don't have a timeline for this yet. I believe the deadline that was given for the survey that was sent out was this Friday, perhaps, Debbie?
Yes, that's
Um,
correct.
and so once we've received all the sorry, all the responses that we're going to get from the survey, then we'll be reviewing those and start reaching out to the employers that we feel would be that would meet the criteria, and get started on that. And Debbie, I can see you're answering the question about the PowerPoint. There's a question here: are the 2025 or 24-25 allocations available on the portal based on the amount approved? I'm I guess I might need clarification on what you mean by amount approved. If you mean by, if that relates to like the expenditures based on the starting allocation. If I understand you correctly, no. The amounts currently in the portal for 24-25 are well, yeah. Debbie, do you want to answer this?
If I'm understanding this question, are the 24-25 allocations available in the portal based on amount approved? There's no, I mean, when we do the allocation, we do look at how schools are using their allocation, if that's what you mean. So that's kind of a yes and no thing.
Yeah.
So
And
if you have the funds available and you need more funds, at this time, we may be able to do that. And like I said, how much of an allocation you get is really based on your usage of the allocation. I hope that hope that is a little bit helpful.
Yeah, and maybe I see there's one more question, and maybe this is sort of asking the same thing. Are the funding amounts in the portal accurate now? They're accurate now for now. Like I said, like once things are wrapped up fully on 23-24, we will be adding more to these allocations.
Probably
And
in
so essentially the short answer is I understand that if you look at your allocation right now in the portal and you look at your last year's allocation, it looks like a huge dramatic difference. That's not a cause for I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not a cause for concern. The when things are wrapped up, more money will be added to those allocations. And it's more or less likely that allocations for 24-25 are going to look pretty similar to 23-24. We don't really make, like, like Debbie said, we look at how schools are spending money over the years when we do these allocations, but we don't make really drastic changes to allocations from year to year. It's not like if you have one bad year, all of a sudden we're like slashing your allocation or something like that. If that's like a concern or anything, but yeah,
Yeah.
so short answer to that question is no, they're not accurate in the sense that it reflects what's going to actually be your full total allocation for the entirety of 24-25.
And I believe that's all of our questions.
Yeah, so once again, wanted to thank everyone for being here today.
And please feel free to give us a call or email us
Mhm.
concerns, questions, suggestions, ideas that, we can, portal ideas or suggestions that we can present to our IT team.
Mhm.
We want to thank you for all the work that you do. We really appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah.